Welcome to part 3 of our 1990 music in review. We are up to July 2nd. Devo's Smooth Noodle Maps their 8th release. Smooth Noodle Maps was Devo's last full-length studio album until the release of Something for Everybody in 2010. So they took 20 years off. Wow. The album title refers to a kind of discrete mathematical system called a noodle map, which may exhibit chaotic behavior similar to the standard map. This is referenced in the song Devo Has Feelings Too, which includes the lyric, "Snake through the chaos with a smooth noodle map." Now this is hot shit. The front cover of the record and the fold-out of the CD version featured the members of the band emerging from a strange circle. Let's hear some reviews from Rate Your Music.
Ouch. Not the way to finish off a catalog. The thing about these faux automatons that made them so interesting back in the day was that their music had so much personality. That's sadly gone by 1990. This sonic de-evolution is countered by the group's appearance in the Spirit of 76 movie roundabouts at the same time. That's good stuff. Unfortunately, can't add any stars to this record because of the stellar movie.
I never got Devo. Not back in the day, not now. They're sort of, well, whatever it is, just never appealed to me. So how I ever got this disc, I don't remember. But I listened to it. And it's not the worst thing I've ever heard. It's, well, whatever it is. If a non-fan can sit through this thing and not get creeped out, I imagine it's an all-right effort. As a few other Devo albums I heard were downright terrifying in their persistent, bland weirdness.
Devo's swan song is a disappointment. The band had lost its way by this point. All I can say is that they are at least remembered. They should be having fun. Smooth Noodle Maps is the least enjoyable to listen to.
The album holds the distinction of being Devo's worst-selling efforts. Anything about Devo? Just whip it, right? Just wearing the weird hats and whip it, or whip it fucking good, Sean.
Oh, that was Devo?
Yeah. Sure. You don't have to fucking tell me. July 3rd, Suicidal Tendancies released their 5th album, Lights, Camera, Revolution. This album shows the band straying further away from their roots as a crossover thrash band and beginning to solidify themselves more and more as a thrash metal band. At this point, it could be argued that the band had moved the crossover thrash to thrash metal. The song arrangements are more complex, as are the lyrics. This was also the first Suicidal Tendencies album to display heavy funk influences, which can be attributed to the input of new bassist Robert Trujillo. The video for You Can't Bring Me Down received lots of MTV airplay and was largely responsible for the success of the album. It was certified gold a few years later. It was also nominated for the Best Metal Performance Grammy Award in 1991, losing to Stone Cold Crazy by Metallica, whom Trujillo would join 13 years later in 2003. Let's go to some Rate Your Music user reviews.
I guess they're decent at what they do, but their brand of corny thrash is really off-putting me. I mean, Alone is not going to be a favorite at the time. And even if it's going to be a parody of it, it still sucks. The rest of the album is better, but not really good enough to capture my attention in a meaningful way. Sounds really mediocre to me.
Amazing album. A few duds in the middle, but overall, a remarkable piece of work. They were never able to top it. In 1981, readers of the punk zine Flipside voted them the worst band, biggest assholes. Suicidal Tendencies were often associated with gang culture, and they were frequent outbursts of violence at their early gigs. The gang controversy surrounding the band helped to garner label attention. Due to an incident at their 1984 show at the Perkins Palace in Pasadena, in which fans tore out 10 rows of seats and promoters couldn't secure insurance to hire them, Suicidal Tendencies were banned from playing a show in Los Angeles. The ban was eventually lifted in the early 90s. Brick by Brick is the 10th studio album by American singer Iggy Pop. Released on July 10th, Brick by Brick became Iggy Pop's first certified gold album with more than 500,000 copies sold. Several famous fans appeared on stage with Iggy during the tour, including longtime fan Johnny Depp. We go to a Rate Your Music user review.
It has its moments, but nothing that is really worth putting your money down for, unless it just doesn't matter.
It's a nice album. There's still some venom in the lyrics, and there's no particularly bad songs. So he's less of a street-walking cheetah and more of a cuddly domesticated house cat. But he hasn't been declawed, and he can still throw a nasty hiss your way now and then. Sometimes I just forget that Iggy is a man and not a character. I've been following him for years. Selfishly, I miss the dope a little bit. Butttown received high praise from MTV animated duo Beavis and Butthead. The latter stated, "This song has the best lyrics I've ever heard." In the early to middle 90s, Iggy Pop would make several guest appearances on the Nickelodeon show The Adventures of Pete and Pete. He played James Mecklenburg, Nona Mecklenburg's father. Are you familiar with that?
I am not.
We'll move the fuck on then. July 10th also saw the release of Flesh and Blood from Poison. And that was their third studio album. The album peaked at number 2 on the Billboard charts, and it sold over 7.2 million copies worldwide. The album spawned 3 gold singles, including Unskinny Bop, Ride the Wind, and the ballad Something to Believe In, which was dedicated to the band's security guard and close friend, James Mono, who had died. What do other people think about it? Let's go to a Rate Your Music user review.
By far the best Poison album. The album isn't as chock full of anthemic rock classics as the first 2 albums, but Flesh and Blood is a much more listenable album overall. Sure, there are some bad spots here and there, but the band shows its maturity since the last album. Producer Bruce Fairbairn also helps bring the best out of the band, bringing some nice bluesy moments to add to their predictable pop rock. Unfortunately for them, the hair metal craze was nearly ending shortly after this album's release.
There were maybe 2 tracks on side 1 where I thought, this isn't bad. Well, not as bad as I was expecting. Then they hit you with the irritating single Unskinny Bop, and it is all downhill from there. Side 2 is embarrassingly awful, until maybe the last track, which is a Hendrix-inspired barroom blues type thing. A waste of £2, really. Ow, God.
Another masterpiece. I mean, massive piece of shit.
Woo. The front cover of the album featured the Poison logo and the album titled as a tattoo on Ricky Rocket's arm, his third arm.
Oh.
July 24th, Cowboys from Hell is the 5th studio album and major label debut from American heavy metal band Pantera. The cover art depicts the band in a quaint Western saloon. The album was ranked number 11th on the October 2006 issue of Guitar World's magazine list of 100 greatest guitar albums of all time. The band eventually landed a billing for Monsters in Moscow in September of 91, where they played to a crowd of over 500,000 in celebration of the new freedom of performing Western music in the former Soviet Union shortly before its collapse 3 months later. Let's go to some Rate Your Music user reviews.
Well, what can I say? Cowboys from Hell was the album that put Pantera out there. This particular album was a huge turnaround for Pantera. Some brilliant songs from this album are, of course, Cowboys from Hell, Cemetery Gates, and Psycho Holiday. I give this album a 5 out of 5, a must-have for any metalhead who likes to have a few drinks and a couple of spliffs while going crazy.
Cowboys from Hell is often considered the main starter point in Pantera's career, often seen as the beginning of the band who saved metal during the decade. While this is horribly false, they did create some of the most recognizable albums to exist, leaving a permanent mark in heavy metal's history. Before actually trying, this was my first time, which was about 2 years ago. I had no hesitation. Everyone always calls Pantera survivors and legends in this world of metal. From Phil Anselmo's "screw you" attitude to Dimebag Darrell's strange yet recognizable guitar tone that happened to influence hundreds, if not thousands of bands, intrigued me greatly. Thinking I was about to hear one of the greatest albums to exist, I gave it a shot, listening to the full album. So how is it? One of the most boring albums in history.
The Pantera story, as it's been passed into canon, goes like this. For 4 albums in the 80s, they wrote some seriously cheesy, incorrigible hair metal shit before getting their act together on Cowboys from Hell and suddenly turning into one of the defining metal bands of the 90s. I don't know about anybody else, but I can still hear a significant chunk of cheesy, incorrigible hair metal shit on this album too. It was a leap forward for them, and it deserves credit for that. But it wasn't a clean break by any means.
Tensions began to surface among the band members when Anselmo became addicted to heroin in 1995. He almost died from an overdose in 96. These tensions resulted in the recording sessions for The Great Southern Trendkill being held separately. The ongoing tension lasts for another 7 years, during which one studio album, Reinventing the Steel, was recorded. Pantera went on hiatus in 2001, but was disbanded by the Abbott brothers in 2003 amid communication problems and their conclusion that Anselmo would not return to the band. The Abbott brothers went on to form Damage Plan, while Anselmo continued to work on several side projects, including Down, which Rex Brown joined as well. On December 8th of 2004, Dimebag Darrell was shot and killed on stage by a mentally unstable fan during a Damage Plan concert in Ohio, permanently ending hopes for a full band reunion. The other co-founder, Vinnie Paul, died in 2018, leaving Glaze as the only surviving member of the band's first lineup. The band has sold more than 60 million records as of late 2017. July 24th, In the Heart of the Young is the second album by the American rock band Winger. The album was certified platinum. The second release from Winger doesn't bring anything new to the table, so it's either a love it or hate it album. We go to some Rate Your Music user reviews.
Listening to it a number of times over the past few days, there's no doubt it is anchored to the hair metal era. Most of the songs are syrupy, sugar sweet, very much in the same genre as Def Leppard and even Cinderella. The album itself comes together well, all of the songs complementing each other. These days I have to be in the right mood to put it on and listen to it. No use being in an angry mood and looking to bleed that off with angry music. This is the easy listening category of hard rock metal music.
When it comes to cheesy glam metal, I'll admit that sometimes I can't get enough, but this one is miles away from interesting. Paid $1 for it, and I wish I had that dollar back. Oh well, easy come, easy go. Buy this one under one condition: gunpoint. Otherwise, you're headed for a heartbreak. Seriously, this one's lame, even by Winger standards. Winger was the subject of frequent ridicule in MTV's animated series Beavis and Butthead during the mid-90s. The neighbor boy Stuart, who was always trying to be accepted by Beavis and Butthead, was usually depicted wearing a Winger t-shirt as opposed to the Metallica and AC/DC shirts worn by the title characters. Beavis and Butthead thought of them as wussies, belittling their videos, especially the 17 video. Mike Judge continued to mock Winger in his next animated series, King of the Hill, as the character of John Redcorn was a former roadie for the band until embarking on a Native American vision quest where he discovered that wrangling groupies for Winger was not a proper life path.
About the same time, Lars Ulrich of the band Metallica could be seen throwing a dart on a poster of Kip Winger in the video for Nothing Else Matters. When asked about this, Kip Winger once stated, "That is why it's the great irony that we ended up on the geeky guy's shirt on Beavis and Butthead, because Metallica couldn't play what we play. They couldn't do it. They literally, technically, couldn't do it. And I'll challenge those chumps to that any day of the week. But we could play their music with our hands tied behind our back." And so, I was a little teed off about that, but in the end, none of that shit matters. In reference to the dispute, Winger wrote the song Hell to Pay, in which Metallica song titles and lyrics are used in opposition to the band that wrote them. In 1994, when the magazine Metal Edge asked Kip who he'd like to look like, given the chance to look like some other rock star, Kip took his shot at slapping the drummer of Metallica. "I would not like to change my looks, really. I think I look okay already, but someone I would not have liked to look like was Lars Ulrich."
Other artists with albums out in July of 1990 were Santana, the Allman Brothers, Harry Connick, Two Live Crew, the Neville Brothers, and Dread Zeppelin. We moved to August, which was a very busy month in 1990 for hit albums. We start with August 7th, John Bon Jovi, Blaze of Glory, his debut solo album. It includes songs from and inspired by the movie Young Guns 2. The album featured guests such as Elton John, Little Richard, and Jeff Beck. Blaze of Glory was awarded a Golden Globe. It also received Academy Award and Grammy nominations. John Bon Jovi also made a cameo appearance in the film as one of the prisoners in the pit with Doc and Chavez. Have you seen that? You've seen this.
Oh, yeah.
You won't know all about this.
I very much enjoy Young Guns, too.
Was it good for its time?
Yeah, it was very good.
Let's go to Rate Your Music User Reviews.
I hate to say it, but John Bon Jovi does a fairly decent job here. In fact, much better than his works with his own band.
Doing a road trip? Put it on the stereo and sing along for miles. Full of fun, rockin' tunes that captured the spirit of the movie. In 2009, John Bon Jovi was inducted at the Songwriters Hall of Fame due to their contribution for the collaborations with songwriters. August 13th, Bossa Nova by the Pixies was their third album. Bossa Nova reached number 70 in the U.S. In contrast, the album peaked at number 3 in the United Kingdom. Let's go to some Rate Your Music User Reviews.
I was okay with the Pixies before. Found them a bit inconsistent and short of breath. I find this fourth offering of tracks much more captivating and musical. I would say one of the finer pieces of rock music around. The songs kick that same old great quirky ass, but now lead to something solid and conclusive. Much more satisfying.
My least favorite Pixies album. It's not god-awful disaster or anything, but it does feel like a massive step down in quality compared to Surfer Rosa and Doolittle. While it does have some of their all-time classics, it also has some songs that make me want to reach for the skip button.
A big drop in quality from the first two albums. It starts off great, and Valuria is one of the best songs they ever did. But from about the midway point onward, things began to meander, and I began to lose interest somewhat.
The late Kurt Cobain gave an interview to Rolling Stone in 1994, and he said he was basically trying to rip off the Pixies. Cobain told the magazine that Nirvana tried to imitate the sound of the Pixies in that they would spend part of the song singing quietly, and then they'd become very loud. Cobain said that he should have been in the Pixies, or would have at least wanted to be in a Pixies cover band. August 20th, Tear from Black Sabbath, the group's 15th studio album. In Norse mythology, Tyr is the god of single combat and heroic glory and the son of Odin. This album represents possibly the most dramatic departure from Black Sabbath's traditional sound, with only traces of it found in the occasional riff. Let's see what some user reviews from Rate Your Music say.
This album feels rather slow, lacks melodies, strong riffing, and is also lacking creativity. It's just like going forward painfully, slowly, and making you look every now and then. How many tracks are still to go? It takes more or less until Valhalla, until there comes some up-tempo stuff on the album. And that pretty much remains the only glimpse of hope. Although Heaven and Black seems very good as well in the context of the rest of the album. Good theme for the album, but poor finalizing.
This guy really likes to talk about the album. He said, literally, you skipped him saying album 40 times, and you still said it 20 times.
I had to skip it.
Wow. Black Sabbath in 1990 was Tony Iommi and a bunch of other guys, as it had been for years. There's nothing wrong with a leader keeping a band going, per se, but honestly, I think the guys who do this internationally, I think that he's trying to say intentionally, through some sort of UN action, should be forced to keep around a friend from the old days who tell them they should give it a rest. On Tear, the once magical Black Sabbath is redefined as a glossicap of the Dio era, with extra synths and bigger choruses. This is not at all a bad album. Unlike the 70s stuff, it sounds very dated today. Even songs like the Sabbath Stones, which could otherwise be good, are somewhat neutered by an overly clean and polished production. Culturally, Black Sabbath have exerted a huge influence in both television and literature, and have in many cases become synonymous with heavy metal. Against the Law is the fifth release and fifth studio album from the Christian metal band Stryper. It was released on August 21st, 1990. This album marked a change in the musical and visual direction of the band. Gone were the yellow and black spandex outfits, the bold evangelical lyrics, and the original band logo with Isaiah 53:5. In their place were leather outfits and lyrics more focused on rock and roll and relationships. Although arguably from a Christian worldview, the album sold piss poorly compared to the band's previous gold and platinum releases. Let's see what some other motherfuckers think.
Well, I'm not sure what possessed them to go down this track. They had a successful following, both of Christian fans and metal fans. They had two excellent and two good albums behind them. Then they released this. At the time of release, there had been murmurings that Stryper were going to head in a less religious vein in order to reap more commercial success. I'm still not sure if this is true or not, but I do know that the songs and songwriting certainly changed in this effort.
Great. Full of catchy riffs and hooks without the overly Christian lyrics. If it weren't for the songwriting being somewhat weak, this would be a really great album. So this band took the name Stryper because it looks similar to the word hyper, as a nod to their high-energy live shows. The band's yellow and black color scheme is meant to resemble the eye-catching colors of caution signs seen on highways, as a warning against the evils of the world. Ironically, Michael Sweet has said that he's not particularly fond of the color yellow and never wears it when he's off stage. The original album cover of To Hell with the Devil depicted the band's members as angels casting Satan down into a pit. Many Christian retail outlets refused to stock the album because of its controversial artwork, so it was changed to a plain black cover with just the band's logo and title. A popular urban legend during the 80s claimed that Stryper were planning a concert tour with Satanic Thrasher's Slayer, which would have been called the Heaven and Hell Tour. Both bands dismissed the persistent rumors as nothing more than the funny idea. Slayer's Kerry King once said of the potential pairing, "Are you kidding? Our fans would kill them." Kerry King being, what, 4'8", we learned?
I thought he was shorter than that.
Oh, 2'8". Future American Idol judge Randy Jackson played bass guitar on Stryper's cover of a Earth, Wind, and Fire song. Walmart refused to stock the goddamn Evil CD in its stores for fear that its title might offend conservative customers. Detonator is the fifth studio album from American glam metal band Rat. It was released in August of 1990. Let's go to some user reviews.
Rat's Detonator is a rare example of an album where the band collaborates with hack songwriters, and it kind of works. Names such as Desmond Child and Diane Warren are here, striving to make Rat helm hit after hit. While no classic by any means, Detonator is what a good Rat album should be. Pure dumb fun.
This is a catchy album. In a repetitive kind of way. You can put it on, as I did at work tonight, and tap away to it or bop your head or whatever it is you tend to do when an album with a beat comes on, and that is all fine and well. I use this as a technique to decide if I listen to an album, so it works on that level. During the 7 shows of the Japanese leg of the Detonator tour in February of 91, Crosby's substance abuse had reached a point to where his playing had become increasingly inconsistent. The band had already removed the acoustic intro to Back for More, which Crosby performed along with modifying sections of other songs that featured him as the lead guitarist. During one particular show, after the band performed 2 songs using non-standard tunings, Crosby did not properly switch out guitars with his guitar technician. As a result, he was not in tune with the band for the next 2 songs. The last show of the Japanese tour in Osaka turned out to be Crosby's last with Rat. He would not record or perform with the band again. Persistence of Time is the 5th studio album by American thrash metal band Anthrax. It was released on August 21st, 1990. This is the last full studio album to feature Joey Belladonna on vocals until 2011. But it was certified gold. Let's go to some reviews.
This is a darker and heavier Anthrax. After 2 listens to all the way through, I wasn't impressed until I heard that riff from Keep It in the Family. It has one of the greatest downbeat grooves I've ever heard. Excellent use of double time of that riff later in the song.
In 1992, Anthrax made a cameo appearance on the popular sitcom Married with Children, performing a Persistence of Time song. Ritual de lo Habitual is the 2nd studio album by Jane's Addiction, released on August 21st, 1990. The album is divided into halves. Tracks 1 through 5 are unrelated rock songs. The cassette version of the album has about 10 minutes of silence on side A because side B is 10 minutes longer. Tracks 6 through 9 are in memoriam of singer Perry Farrell's deceased girlfriend, who died of a heroin overdose in 1987 at the age of 19. It was the band's final studio album before their initial breakup in 91. Singles from the album include Been Caught Stealing and Stop. It is certified 2 times platinum in the U.S. Differences between the members on the issue of drug use on the tour led to a schism. Farrell and Perkins regularly partook while Avery and Navarro abstained. According to Spin, between shows, Avery and Navarro sought to avoid temptation by retiring to a section of the tour bus set aside for them. After shows, Avery and Navarro's wife at the time would retire to their hotel. They have, said Spin, simply learned that you cannot use any kind of drugs anymore without becoming slaves to them, and slavery is death. In the late 1991, Avery told Navarro that he planned to leave. Navarro quickly agreed to do the same. The two told their management, who in turn tried to convince them to play in Japan, but Avery and Navarro only wanted to play as much as contractually obligated. Janes played their last shows in Australia and Hawaii before disbanding. It's weird to be the end of a cycle like that, remarked Avery, having run the gamut of the usual rock story from beginning to end. You get signed, get strung out, and break up. Here's a couple reviews from Rate Your Music users.
This album is like a harrowing car crash which is impossible to look away from, even though it will haunt you forever.
In the late 80s and early 90s, people actually gave a fuck about Jane's Addiction. These were worrying and troubling times. They weren't a bad band per se. They could be pretty enjoyable and tuneful when the mood took them, and Dave Navarro at least knew his way around a riff or two. The problem is the affected weirdness that just they couldn't help themselves from putting on. If they were a genuinely odd band to their core, I could get behind that. But even Quirky Touch in this album feels like an attention-seeking put-on. I'm not sure whether or not it's right to blame all that on Perry Farrell, but he's most of the problem at any rate. As a rock frontman, he's definitely one of the most grating. It's a shame, as he always comes across as very kind and a humble person in interviews and on reality TV shows. Put him on a song and he seems anything but, sadly.
Forget about Nirvana. Forget about Radiohead. Forget about the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Jane's Addiction's Ritual is far better than any of their albums during this decade.
Jane's Addiction is usually regarded as one of the most influential acts in alternative music. That does it for part 3. Please, please, please tune in to part 4, which is the last part of our 1990 music recap.